Mats did was the last 5 minutes of every single class. He made us take out our journals, take our pens, and the only rule for 5 full minutes was your pen must be touching the page. And for me at age 14, rather lost, rather angry at my father for having me taken me away from a world where I was someone into a world where I was lost and no one, putting my pen on that page. The first time was, I don't know what he's looking for, don't know what he wants. Day 2, Mr. Mats is continuing with this. I don't know what he's looking for. Day 3, he's not even going to read this. What's the point of work that a teacher isn't going to review? Day 5, my mom didn't look too happy on the way to school this morning. Day 6, my brother seems to be struggling. And I have written something in a journal every day of my life since I was 14 years old. Wow. I've written down where I am, who I'm with, the questions that are in my head. And I would say in times of uncertainty, slowing down, stopping, just taking a pen and putting on a page and letting stuff come out, just letting what's in your head, what's in your body, your fears, your questions, letting it come out.
Hello and welcome back to the Pharmaverse Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pietrack. And if you're a leader or an aspiring leader in the pharmaceutical industry, well, then you're in the right place, because we interview the brightest stars from all the corners of the pharma universe. But today's guest is not from pharma. Our producer asked me if I could have any person on the podcast, who would it be? And I gave him a list of 10 people, and Conor Neill was near the very top. Conor Neill is a leadership expert. He's a keynote speaker. He's a coach, entrepreneur. He's the senior lecturer in leadership communications at IESE Business School in Barcelona. He's also the president of Vistage in Spain, and Vistage is a global prominent CEO coaching organization. He's founded multiple companies while teaching leaders how to move people to action and communicate persuasively. Today, we're going to be discussing how to lead through uncertainty, how life rewards leaders who take action, and how the best leaders are good storytellers. So, Conor Neill, welcome to the Pharmaverse.
Thank you, Michael. Pleasure to join you.
The pleasure is mine. The first video I ever watched was how to start a speech. I think that's such a great leadership lesson because leaders have to be good storytellers. Can you walk us through why leaders have to be good storytellers?
A friend of mine, Malik Muhammad, and his whole idea is to get any change to happen, you need 2 things: connection plus challenge. Without connection, challenge is just bullying. Without challenge, connection is empty. But connection must happen first. And connection, one of the most powerful ways of connecting is through story. If I share something about me, something I've lived through, an experience I've had, and it resonates with you, you connect to me. And I think that video, how to start a speech, I talk about, what do you do when you stand up in front of a group of people? And the most powerful thing you can do is share a personal story where they relate to who you are, what's your motivation, what's bringing you here in front of them today. And I think I've had a wonderful opportunity for the last 23 years to be a professor of leadership communication at IESE Business School here in Barcelona. And, working with people very often, the most powerful things I can help leaders do is just simplifying everything down to one story that represents why they come to work. One story that represents a mentor and generosity of spirit. And if they've got those stories and they can tell them, the impact they can have is huge. I think something I would say is often the time you most need to speak is when you don't know what to say. When you're sat there and you're looking around, you're waiting for someone to say something and thinking, someone needs to say something. That's kind of when a leader needs to step up and say something. And, what I work on courses with, what can you say? In a moment where you don't know what to say, what's valuable to talk about? For me, one of the greatest things you can talk about is why you joined the company or why you became a leader. The greatest leader that you've had the privilege of following. When I was 14 years old, my father's job moved from Dublin to Chicago, and I went from being a cool, popular kid in a school in Dublin to a strange kid that just didn't fit in, The clothes I was wearing were cool for Ireland, but they were very strange for Chicago in 1985. And I went from kind of being someone to being a nobody. And for 14-year-olds, that is very difficult. And for me, if I remember being 14 years old, the most agonizing experience was lunchtime food. When I was 14, I was really struggling. But the biology teacher I had that year in school is probably been one of the greatest influencers on my life. And I wouldn't be here speaking to you without him. His name was Eric Matz. And Mr. Matz, there's 3 things that Mr. Matz did that year in school that I think had a lasting impact on my life.
I'd like to take a moment just to thank our sponsors. First, K. Bassman International, your premier recruiting resource in the pharma industry. And secondly, Executive Biotech Advisors, an outstanding consulting firm in the biotech arena. Now, back to the episode.
The first thing he did is every day when he walked into class, he strode in and he said, "It's a great day." And I suspect that's something that leaders can do in times of uncertainty. We have a choice. We have an opportunity. And sometimes when things are looking very hard, it's very easy to drop your gaze and forget. But, just that energy of today's a great day. We're alive. We woke up this morning. We opened our eyes. We can see it's a great day. So finding a way of being grateful. The second thing that for me really had a lasting impact from Mr. Matz. I was an apathetic 14-year-old who'd given up on school, and Mr. Matz, day one of school, held up the biology textbook and he said, "How much is this book worth?" And it took a while for apathetic 14-year-olds to finally someone put their hand up and said $32. And Mr. Matz said, "At the end of this year, if you've learned everything in this book, you're worth $32 more." That's not what this year is about. If at the end of this year, you have become curious about life, about how life systems interact, you look at a squirrel and a tree and you see how they depend on each other. And if at the end of this year, you have grown in curiosity and have systems to think about how life works, you're worth infinitely more. That's what this year is about, which I had never heard a teacher say that was the purpose of a year. And the third thing that Mr. Matz did was the last 5 minutes of every single class. He made us take out our journals, take our pens, and the only rule for 5 full minutes was your pen must be touching the page. Putting my pen on that page, the first time was, I don't know what he's looking for. Don't know what he wants. Day 2, Mr. Matz is continuing with this. I don't know what he's looking for. Day 3, he's not even going to read this. What's the point of work that a teacher isn't going to review? Day 5, my mom didn't look too happy on the way to school this morning. Day 6, my brother seems to be struggling. And I have written something in a journal every day of my life since I was 14 years old. I've written down where I am, who I'm with, the questions that are in my head. And I would say in times of uncertainty, slowing down, stopping, just taking a pen and putting on a page and letting stuff come out, just letting what's in your head, what's in your body, your fears, your questions, letting it come out. And for me, I think writing is the only way we get our minds to actually think in a structured and ordered way. One of the things that is a real tool for me in times of crisis is just taking out a journal, getting the pen, putting my fears down, my worries, what I'm thinking, who's in my mind. And often the moment I've got everything down on that page, I start to get some sense of clarity and what I can say. So I would say in times of crisis, there's nothing better than what Mr. Matz managed to pass into a 14-year-old version of Conor, which is, number one, being grateful as an attitude, not looking for things to be grateful for, but just really appreciating that each morning when you wake up, the day is not owed to you. The sunrise is not owed to you. The fact you open your eyes and you can see is not owed to you. We have such a capacity to take things for granted and forget what a magical thing they are. The other thing that I work with people a lot on crisis and challenge is how you perceive difficulty. Because most people think growth is a fun process. The growth is a painful frustration where you confront things. And I would think the times when you're frustrated and lost and struggling are the times when you're growing fastest, you're discovering most. So for me, starting to appreciate that a life without struggle is going to be a very empty use of this time here. A life with too much struggle perhaps overwhelms us, but there's a necessary amount of struggle to truly advance and become wiser, stronger year after year.
When you come out of the uncertainty, you're a different person, and staying positive through that uncertainty is crucial. And I love the part about writing. I process things through writing, and sometimes just journaling will take some of the anxiety away. I deal with leaders. There's really two different kinds of leadership roles. There's one where you're going to build a team from scratch, but then there's another time where you come in and the team's already there. Now, this is one of the early videos that I remember watching, but you talked about 5 or 6 different people decisions that a new leader has to do. Can you walk us through those briefly?
There's a book called The Leader's Window, and the Leader's Window kind of reduces people decision down to essentially that there's 2 factors that are important: motivation and competence. And at the simplified level, Leader's Window, for any role, you look at a person and you need to evaluate their competence and their motivation. So, if I thought, I want to create a podcast, and I look at Michael and I think his eyes are shining, he can see how this is going to improve his life, that would be motivation level 2. So, this is something that without me, you're going to go and do it yourself. So motivation level 2 is I'd have to stop you from doing it. Motivation level 1 is with a bit of pushing, you can kind of see that maybe it would help. Motivation level 0 is you don't see how creating a podcast will have an impact on who you want to be in the future. And for every person and every task, you need to do that little evaluation. So you get motivation 0, 1, 2, competence. Their capability. Again, it's 0, 1, 2. 0, they've never done it before. 1, they've got some studies, but they've never done it in this context. So maybe they've got 1 or 2 years of experience, but not in something of this degree of complexity. So maybe they've done it in a 100-person organization, but now it's a 1,000-person organization. Level 2, 5-year track record of delivering on exactly this. Now, that gives you a sum. So if the sum of motivation and competence is 0, there's nothing you can do. And it's called go to HR. Like there is nothing you can do. There's no magic you can create. There's no leadership skill that you can develop to take someone that is competence 0, motivation 0, and get them to do something. And I find so many leaders believing it's their issue. It's not their issue. Now, if the sum of it is 1, they're maybe a bit motivated, but no competence, or they've got competence, but they're not really that motivated. You need to manage them, which means pretty much you're going to spend about as much time looking after them as it would take to do it yourself. And you would only do that if you could see a very quick path to 2 where they're going to be able to do it. It's almost going to be, you can only look after 1 person at that stage because you're going to have to use all your motivation to get them to keep moving and all your competence to scaffold them. You could probably look after 2 people at level 2. You could probably look after 10 to 15 people at level 3, but you can look after millions of people at level 4. Something really important in the Leader's Window is there's a huge difference between what they call delegating and dumping. And delegating, I take a hugely motivated person who's got a lot of skill and I let them know, Michael, I am so pleased you're here. We're going to be able to do stuff with you that I would not be able to do. I am so grateful to have you here. Now, you know more than I do. You've seen this before. Help me make this happen. I'm going to be here, but you take this, you run with it. I'm here if you need me, but wow, I am so grateful we have you in this team. Now, that would be delegating. Dumping, from my side, kind of looks the same. I give it to you, I give you freedom, but I never tell you that I'm grateful you're here. I never tell you how lucky I feel that you're part of this. I assume it's obvious and I don't make the effort. And very often well-intentioned leaders, because they assume that their actions are sufficient, do not tell people how important they are to them. Do not tell people why I'm glad that you are taking this. So this distinction between dumping and delegating, I think, is a hugely important one to look at because it doesn't take a lot of extra time, but it really takes getting out of yourself and seeing the world from other people's point of view. When I teach communication, I often say the absolute most fundamental difference between poor communication and great communication. All poor communication starts with the question, what do I want to say? All great communication starts with, what do they need from me? If you sit down and you think, what do they need from me? Now, step 1, if you can't answer that, there's a very important lesson in what they might need from you. Once you can answer it, make sure Anytime you're speaking, you're starting from that question. What do they need from me now? It's very easy for my ego to get locked into, I'm 23-year teacher. I've got a YouTube channel. I'm a big deal. What do I want? What do I get? I deserve. If you could see behind the screen, there's a lot of little notes just to remind me that I need to get out of that and connect to Michael. And I'm trying to think of Michael's listeners in their cars, in their homes, going out to walk with their dogs, listening to this podcast and imagining, what are they looking for in this moment? And, very often, perhaps the lesson I need to share with most people is your life is full of inspiring stories. You don't need to be Michael Jordan. You don't need to be Barack Obama. You don't need to have had an accident in the mountains and come back. Your own life to you is normal. But once you start to tell the stories of your childhood, of the mentors, the teachers that stepped in, you'll start to realize like some of the simplest stories from your life have huge resonance for other people.
Yeah, like the Mr. Matt story resonates with me. I had the reverse of what you had, but that story resonates with me, and it's true. And speaking of little notes, on my monitor right here is a note, life rewards action. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what that means?
I think human beings, one of the great dangers is we get a lot of reward from intention. So I can sit here and intend to be a good father and get a little benefit. I can intend to be a good son. I can intend to do something for my wife this evening. And I get a little shoot of happiness from that intention, but I never turn it into action. I can intend to call my father, but I don't pick up the phone. I can intend to prepare for class tomorrow, but not actually do it. And I think one of the dangers is the smarter people get, the more they live in intention, the more they get a reward from I intend to lead well. I intend to prepare. I intend to get better. I intend to be healthy. And nothing changes when you intend. It's only when it turns into action. And what I saw certainly in my life early on, how often I had good intention, but it didn't get turned into any action.
Yeah.
And I think the smarter you get, the better you get at talking yourself out of action, at excusing yourself for taking action, at telling yourself this action is too small, too insignificant, it's not going to make a difference, and you don't take action. We use our brains to find shortcuts, and sometimes just getting on and doing something rather than trying to find a shortcut can make such a bigger difference. So for me, action changes other people's lives, and there's always an action you can take. And sometimes that action is listening. Sometimes that action is ask a question. Sometimes that action is write a letter. And
Great.
There's a little saying I had written down from a mentor of mine, Rajesh Sethi. And it's something along the lines of speaking to someone and helping them raise their goal by a factor of 2 or 3 costs very little to you and can transform the life of another person. So, if I speak to you and you share a little bit about the podcast and your goals and how many people you speak to, and I'm interested, and I say, wow, I think you could do that 5-10 times bigger. Imagine the impact. What's stopping you? For a lot of leaders, letting someone know you're glad that they're here, asking them what they're working on and encouraging them to think, what would it look like to be 5 times, 10 times bigger? What would it look like to impact it 5 or 10 times bigger?
Yeah.
And not solving it, not taking it on, just challenging. And I think at the very beginning, I talked about Malik Muhammad's little formula, connection plus challenge. So connection, I'm glad you're here. The challenge, we need you to step it up. This company needs what you're bringing. We need people like you to come in and show things and demonstrate how things can be better. But make sure you connect, but also have a little bit of challenge.
That's good. Those are great. And it reminds me of another video about another one of your friends that's a farmer. I think it was called Dirt Management. Do you remember that one?
Oh, yeah. Well, this was, I don't know where I read that story. And I'd say, behind me, there's a lot of Greek and Roman mythology, a lot of religious texts, because they're full of stories that capture lessons. And that particular idea that, someone was talking about farming, and a farmer cannot make a plant grow. A great farmer is not going to the seed, grow, come on, grow. Like, what are the tools that a farmer has to create a great crop? And this concept that 90% of the work of a farmer is managing dirt. If the dirt is good, the plants grow. It's in the nature of plants to grow. And I would suspect, human beings, it's in the nature of humans to grow, to contribute, to do well. Someone starting in your organization today, in fact, this reminds me of a story my father shared about an American football coach called Lou Holtz. Notre Dame, Lou Holtz. And Lou Holtz came onto the stage and to 1,000 Accenture partners talked about leadership, teams, and football. And at the end of his talk, there was some questions. And my father remembers one of the senior partners of Accenture put his hand up, got the microphone. He says, Lou, loved your talk. Lou, what do you do with demotivated players? They finished the questions and answers. There was applause. Lou Holtz was walking off. And as he was about to leave the stage, Lou Holtz came back onto the stage, took the microphone. He says, I want to go back to that question. Demotivated players. And he says, look, at Notre Dame, the people joining our team, when they were 12 years old, they had a poster on their wall of the Notre Dame team. From 12 years old, they have dreamt of nothing more than the day they would join our team. When they're 20 and they get a call and they come and join us, for years they've been waiting for this moment. They are ready to give everything. And he said, I bet when you hire a new hire into Accenture, into your organization, they've dreamt of this moment for years. The moment where they get a job where they can truly contribute, where they can learn to be part of something. And day one, every single new hire walking through your doors, walking with the same energy of a new player joining the Notre Dame football team. And he says, if after 1 month or 1 year, they've lost that motivation, he said, I don't think that's their issue. I think that's your problem as leaders. What are you doing? What are you doing as leaders that means that someone who joined day one thinking this is the moment that my life truly begins, where I truly get to contribute, what has to happen so that a month in or a year in, they've given up on that dream? People are motivated. Apathy is not a natural state. You've got to do something to human. Like I have a 10-year-old daughter. She doesn't do apathy yet. She has ideas. She wakes up singing. She does art. But by 14, most of us have learned to do a pretty good job of apathy. And I think it's not a natural state. It's a very dangerous thing to be around an adult who knows the stuff but doesn't really care about you. And equally, it's a very dangerous thing to be around leaders who really have strong competence but don't really care about you. And I think some of this is we begin caring too much, we get overwhelmed, and we then shut down, which is antipathy, apathy, sympathy, empathy. Almost going out of my way to create problems for you. Apathy, I just don't care. Sympathy, I do care, but there's a flaw in my caring. And empathy is truly creating the best. And for most of us, we have a problem in confusing sympathy and empathy. Conor, it feels like I'm pushing and pushing every day. There's 2 or 3 people on my team, like they give one good day and then you don't know whether you're going to get another good day, and it's exhausting. Now, sympathy is I put myself in your shoes and I imagine what it would be like for me to lead that team. Now, sympathy, there's a goodness in it, but it's exhausting because I now have to experience the tiring emotion that you're going through. The other thing of that mode of being, I've deleted everything that is most important in you, which is who you are, why this matters to you. Now, empathy is truly seeing that the moment that the people around you are going to grow the most is when they confront problems. And that the greatest thing you can hear about the best people around you is when they come in and they say, Conor, I've got a real problem today. And your reaction is great. it looks like you're enjoying this. I'm going through hell and you're just smiling there and you're, yes. Because human growth happens when we face obstacles. And our current level of being is not enough to overcome this obstacle. And we need to grow stronger and better to overcome it. Empathetic leadership is a type of leadership that loves when your team is facing huge problems because it means they're growing. And an empathetic leader, first attracts great people. These people that are level 2 on competence, level 2 on motivation. But the worst thing that could happen if you pull together a team of people who are really competent, really motivated, and they faced problems this size, little tiny, little crappy problems. What a sad existence. What you truly want is that group to be facing an Everest. Something that today, who they are is not enough to overcome it. But when they overcome it, there's going to be nothing that will have helped them grow as human beings, grow as a team, than overcoming this. And I think a huge part of leadership is learning to love problems, love obstacles. One of the shifts for me is who I'm thinking about most of the time. And that very first business, my goal was Conor to be materially rich. And I suspect everyone that worked for me knew they are here to serve Conor's personal material wealth goal. And it's not an easy thing to get very motivated about making making someone else's rich and comfortable. To me, I needed to learn to shift out and think about the impacts I can make through me and through the team. And, I think a lot about myself. It takes a lot of practice to stop thinking about myself. That book has 2 parts. The first part is his testimony of surviving 4 years in the Auschwitz concentration camp system. And what he said is, it was not luck. The 1 in 32, every survivor had something that kept them alive. And this idea that it was a purpose. And in the book, he talks about there's 3 types of why that will allow you to overcome whatever how. And the 3 types of why that Viktor Frankl talks about, number 1 is someone else needs you. And he said there were prisoners in that concentration camp that they knew that their children were out there somewhere, and one day they're going to need me. And there was never a day that was so bad that they forgot that there's a day my child will need me. I don't know where, I don't know when, but they will need me, and I need to be there for them. One of the purposes that was strong enough for prisoners to survive those horrific conditions was, I'm not staying alive for me. I'm staying alive because there's someone else that will need me. And for me, writing down the list of the people that I want their lives to be better because I'm here. I want to be present in their lives. I've written down that list, and I try and be conscious about playing a role in their lives. The second why that Viktor Frankl talks about is a project only you can complete. And in his own case, it was the book Man's Search for Meaning. And during those years in the prison camp, he had little pieces of paper hidden in his clothes that were the notes that he'd written of that book. And he knew that what he'd witnessed in those camps, someone needed to bear witness of what had happened. And that was his project, to stay alive so that he could bear witness to what had happened, but also bear witness to the psychology of what he'd learned under those conditions, how human beings under the conditions of hell, some of them collapsed, but there were some of them that found a way of staying human in those conditions. So for him, it was the second purpose, that he had a project that only he could complete. The third type of why, and I don't know if I even have the capacity to understand what it is, but what he calls it is you find meaning in the suffering itself. And yeah, I'm not wise enough to know that my interpretation of this is what Viktor Frankl was going towards. He lived through an experience that I have not come close to living through. But, what I did start to reflect on this third thing is there's no animal that will suffer by choice. Only a human being is capable of say, running a marathon. No other species will run a marathon. Only a human being can run for 4 hours with pain in their knees, with their head going, why are you doing this? With their heart bursting, just to say that they run a marathon. So human beings, almost the greatest expression of being human is to go through suffering for something.
Love it. Well, Conor, I can't begin to thank you for being a guest on the Pharmaverse podcast. And I would encourage everyone listening to follow Conor on LinkedIn and YouTube. It's Conor with one N, Neill with two L's. Just great perspectives. And when you watch his videos, you'll be jealous of the location that Conor shoots his videos in. But honestly, Conor, thank you so much for sharing time with me today.
Real pleasure. So thank you to you, and thank you to all of your listeners that have taken a few minutes to listen to this conversation. And I hope it turns into an action that you wouldn't have taken unless you heard our words.
Well, that concludes another episode of the Pharmaverse podcast. We have many more outstanding leaders lined up for you, so make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single career-enhancing insight. But for this episode, that's a wrap. See you next time in the Pharmaverse.